that was step number 2. We're now going to move on swiftly to the final step of scenario planning, and this is the one that takes a lot of time to go through and get right, okay? So step 3 is the creation of these scenarios and then thinking through the impact. So there are quite a few little tiny steps within this bigger step 3. Today we're going to go through and start taking you through the quadrant, the 2x2 quadrant, which is the heart of scenario planning when it's done properly over a long time, okay? So this is called the storyline for scenarios. When we meet again face to face, I'll be taking you through how do you go through and develop some of the contingencies around these scenarios, okay? So let's return to the example from class number 2, which was taken from McKinsey, okay? This is one of the things we looked at was, remember, we went through those different trends and categorized them. For McKinsey, they categorized them into 5 big areas: consumer, geopolitics, the way that consumption is changing, technology, and specifically around industry, right? So every one of those little tiny trends was put into those 5 different categories, and then it was put into this diagram. That diagram looked at, on the left-hand side, how much does this impact the consumer industry that they're focused on? The lower across the variable about predictability. Less predictable is on the left-hand side. More predictable is on the right-hand side. And this is a very important part to generating scenarios. Okay? And you did your own one of these at the end of the class number 2. So I'd like you to go through and think about what you wrote there, because we're going to change things around a little bit. Right? Notice what's at the top of this. So this is what's called a framing question, to help give some sort of direction and focus on how to position those trends. So the framing question says, which trends could affect consumer companies the most? And once you have that question, it allows you to go through and recalibrate to change where you put some of these trends. So your job quite soon is to go through and think of a framing question in your group and then reposition these trends based on that question. So let me give you some examples, further examples of framing questions. Number 1, okay, is this. How can we retain our current value proposition in this volatile world? So if you haven't heard of the term VUCA before, VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, right? The world that we live in at the moment. Okay, so how do we retain our current value proposition? Another example, should we introduce an entirely new product or service to make ourselves relevant and competitive? Another example, this is one that's commonly used. What are the major technological advances on the horizon that we have not thought of or planned for yet? Okay? And therefore, what are the consequences on our industry? So these are examples of framing questions. I want you to spend a few moments in your group for the 3rd exercise to go through and think about different types of framing questions. And once you've done that, you need to return to what's called the uncertainty predictability matrix and reposition some of those trends, some of those themes. Okay, so that is exercise number 3.